This is Food for Thought with Deborah Walker. It's my absolute pleasure to have Karen Tate back on Food for Thought. Radio show host and author of Voices of the Sacred Feminine, Karen is probably one of the most influential and dedicated goddess advocates of the present day. Welcome back to Food for Thought, Karen.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about my passion.
Now, Karen, give my audience a little bit of an understanding of the journey you've been on with this latest book that you've collated and created.
Voices of the Sacred Feminine. Well, and yes, Voices of the Sacred Feminine with the subtitle Conversations to Reshape the World. That is my fourth book out just this month. My other new one out earlier in the year, it's Goddess Calling, Inspirational Messages and Meditations of Sacred Feminine Liberation Theology. I sort of think of them as bookends, to tell you the truth, or even comfort food, because as we turn on the news and, hear things aren't going the way we wish they were going, and we wish society would evolve and, more people would be, more uplifted or aware, I think reading these types of books, help us carry on, help us know that there are alternatives, that what we accept as normal doesn't have to be normal. And, there are lots of people, calling for a new normal. And, the newest one, Voice of the Sacred Feminine, it's actually the title of my radio show that I've been doing for 8 years on Blog Talk. And I started doing the radio show, and this book is an anthology of some of my top-tier guests, because I felt like, we needed a platform, we needed a megaphone to be able to get a new message out about a new normal. So I got together about 40 of some of the people I respect the most and asked them to sort of continue our internet conversation in this book. So it's divided into 4 sections. The first section talks about the sacred feminine, deity, archetype, and ideal, and we talk about what that is and go into some of the goddesses and motherhood and the queen archetype, and then the second part is about ritual and healing, and we talk about things from the mysteries of menstruation and dream temples to how the goddesses love and woman's inhumanity to woman, and the red tent movement. And then the third part, we cover politics and social change. And I actually had people like Noam Chomsky in it, Rianne Eisler, Jean Shinoda Bowen, Laura Flanders of Grit TV, Gloria Felt of Planned Parenthood, and we're talking in there about money and the divine masculine and politics and how patriarchy got started and antidotes to terrorism. And finally, the fourth part is about sacred activism. And some of these people have really paid a price out there in the world, like Father Roy Bourgeois and Matthew Fox, who want to uplift women or embrace the sacred feminine, and they've been excommunicated from the Vatican for it. Starhawk's in that section, and Lydia Rule with her goddess icon spirit banners. And so the book is a mixture of men and women who really do have a vision to change the world.
It was a fascinatingly wide-ranging book, I have to say, far more wide-ranging than I was expecting, as you've covered the different parts. Now, how was it to actually pull all of that depth and breadth of information together to make it so cohesive? Because it is actually a really interesting piece of work that you've pulled together.
Well, I think that is a testament, actually, to the big umbrella that is the sacred feminine. Some people out there would think erroneously that goddess or the divine feminine is only about, I mean, I hate to use these words, they're not mine, they're sometimes the words you hear out there, it's just a bunch of angry women, or it's just for a bunch of lesbians, and that's so untrue. It's propaganda of disinformation, and anybody who says that really doesn't know what it's about. You start to realize just how wide-ranging the sacred feminine is, whether you're talking about the goddess as a deity, or you're talking about it as her as a role model for women and men. And then when you really start to get into this and you get outside yourself, you start to see how the ideals and values of the sacred feminine really do provide benchmarks or templates or values to help us create a more sustainable world, a more fair world, a more just world. And we have a lot of men as allies who get this, and understand this is not about hating men in the least. This is about uplifting men as much as it is uplifting women, because the culture we live in has damaged men as well, and they also need to heal, and the sacred feminine provides that, I think, for both genders.
And it was nice to actually read both perspectives, particularly Noam Chomsky's perspective, I have to say. Absolutely fascinating essay he wrote. It was a transcript of the actual show, wasn't it?
Yes. Some of the entries in the book are actual transcripts. If I thought the interview was just too good, I sometimes use the transcript in the book, or sometimes the contributors provided essays that sort of added to what they talked about in our interview, or maybe updated it, or something like that. So somebody can actually pick up this book who doesn't have much knowledge about the sacred feminine at all, and can really get, I think, a really well-rounded perspective that will explain to them why this is so important. It's been missing in our world, and I think by design, quite frankly, because as Riane Eisler talks about, we live in this dominator culture. There's a few people at the top pulling all the strings, and the rest of us are more or less at the bottom. We're little cogs in the wheel, and we are, they sort of control our lives to a certain extent, and you could almost see how the term we use here in the United States, the 1% versus the 99%, in a way that's another way to describe it, maybe in more political or contemporary terms, because the rich around the world, the multinational corporations, the few people, a few dozen people hold most of the wealth in the world, and they are causing a lot of suffering. They're causing a lot of inequity and imbalance, and the sacred feminine is diametrically opposed to that. The sacred feminine is nature in one aspect, and you really have to have balance in nature, or you have chaos and disaster.
Now, you've worked in this arena for, it's nearly a decade, is my understanding. What were your main insights whilst putting this particular book together, your aha moments? Because after this much time, what actually struck you as, I didn't really think about that?
Well, every day I still learn. Right now I am delving into goddess myths, and I really enjoy looking at a goddess myth, especially if it's been swept beneath the rug, especially if it's a pre-patriarchal goddess myth, before it's been distorted by patriarchy and turned the goddess into just a shadow of her former self. I like to look at those myths and see how, if we had grown up with those myths at the center of society, like we grew up with the male god myths, how it might have given the world different values. And that's sort of, maybe that's the next book, but those are the things I'm looking into right now, and maybe we'll give some talks on or some classes on in the coming year.
And, one of the most fascinating transcripts, just picking up on the myth side of things, in the show called Gossips, Gorgons and Crones, the story of Medusa was absolutely eye-opening for me. How the rape had been repositioned to be marriage, her decapitation, and the explanations of her over the years were so derogatory to women. Once pointed out, it was really hard for me to swallow, to be honest. She's been effectively demonised, and it's such a huge metaphor for how our society is. Do you not think so?
Yes, I do. Because you look at a lot of our myths, and we see that they either demonize women or they set up, normals that we really are unacceptable. For instance, the Demeter and Persephone myth. We believe that there is a pre-patriarchal Demeter and Persephone myth that Hades wasn't even in it. It was just Demeter and Persephone, but the patriarchal myth adds Hades, adds Persephone's abduction, and it's a way to send the signal to society that rape and abduction and domination of women is normal. You see in the myth of Athena, in the patriarchal classical Greek myth, where Athena is birthed from Zeus's head. Now, when has a man ever given birth? Okay, so here you see patriarchy has co-opted the role of woman. One of the things that makes the woman most special, in a sense, her life-giving capacity, such an important role for woman, and patriarchy has to even take that away, and we see that happening in the myths. The myth of Lilith, for instance, the Garden of Eden myth, where all of the symbols of the goddess become evil, the tree, the snake. And Merlin Stone writes that the Garden of Eden myth was actually a political piece written at the time to battle against the powerful goddess spirituality of the time. They were trying to supplant the male god Yahweh, and to do that, they were demonizing goddess, and by association, they've demonized Eve, which means they have demonized woman. So you see how our myths end up shaping our culture, because what happens to women after the Garden Eden of story, women become subservient to men. They are put in a class where they are there to serve man, to be his handmaiden, not his equal, not his partner. And also, she is the cause of sin. She should suffer, And you think about that has reverberated into society today, where you see, women who can be stoned for being raped. I even connect the dots where you see women, aren't receiving equal pay. In some places, even in Western industrial countries, women are still looked at as their only role is childbearer. So we are still paying the price, women are, for the myths that that started thousands of years ago.
I think it's really interesting, the points you make, that we just recently, in the news over here, we had a footballer who was actually a convicted rapist, and one of the football stands was actually named after an Olympian, and she actually asked for her name to be removed when they reinstated him in his role. And she had a huge amount of abuse aimed at her, a significant amount of abuse, and it was just accepted by the media that this is what would happen if you basically decided to speak out. And it was astonishing, and a lot of journalists are finding this, that when they do speak out, that the language towards them becomes very aggressive and sexualized quite quickly.
Yeah, we suffer from that over here too. Domestic violence is another symptom, I think, that goes back to what I was talking about. It's okay to abuse woman, you know. I mean, there are passages in the Bible about, I think you can beat your wife with a stick as long as it's, a certain diameter, I mean, it's incredible, really. And that a book like the Bible could have been adopted as a spirituality when you see all the suffering and the divisiveness and the hate that's in it. But yeah, I mean, women. I mean, here in the United States, the same thing happens. But it's not only in sports. It's also on college campuses that women are raped, and the deans want to sweep it under the rug. We live in a culture where men get the signal that it's not that important. It's not that big a deal. We even have Republican congressmen that are, I hate to say it, but I'm just going to say it, so ignorant that they say stuff like, well, if a woman's raped, she has a mechanism within her body where if she really doesn't want it, that she can prevent herself from becoming pregnant. I mean, how crazy is that? And these are men in our Congress making laws that affect women every day. I mean, it's really pretty scary when you think about it.
Absolutely appalling, in all honesty. And Amy Peck picks up on some of this, doesn't she, in her essay where she writes about where, we need to emphasise more motherly love and actually respect sexuality of the natural and sacred. We've got a real mountain to climb with that, considering, our politicians aren't doing that. Our media certainly don't do that. We've got the likes of Miley Cyrus, cavorting on stage in front of our children. You have to really ask, how do we actually reel this in and change this?
Well, education. I think it's education. It's shows like yours and mine. I think men and women have to start talking about this. Art Noble in the anthology has a wonderful piece on love and the sacred female. And we do have to restore the sacredness of sexuality. Christianity robbed us of that. The pleasure of the body became something evil, something shameful. And it's interesting because within goddess spirituality, we say all acts of pleasure are her rituals. And, you can see in Christianity when Mary becomes pregnant with Jesus, there's no sex involved at all, and Mary, the one woman that is tolerated within the Abrahamic religions, she isn't even a whole woman. She's this benign, she's wonderful, okay? She's got her good points. I'm not bashing Mary, but she's not a whole woman. She's benign, she's subservient, she's the intercessor between humanity and God. She's the one that says, oh, God, if you got a minute here, can you maybe listen to these petitions? Of course she has no sexuality. So there you have another symbol of how patriarchy would love women to behave. That's our role model. But you take the goddesses, and that's a whole nother story. When goddesses enter the picture, you have whole women. You have, sex is sacred. Sex is not something to be ashamed of. Women don't have to shirk from it. Neither do men. In fact, there's teachings that say it's through the sexual union that that men can and women, humanity can know God, can know the divine. And you have archetypes like Kali and Sekhmet and Libertas and the Morrigan, and these are powerhouse archetypes or role models that tell women, they can say no without feeling guilty, that they can be warrioresses if they want to, that they aren't relegated to being sexless or just a mother, that, they can actually be a whole human being finally. And, and that's what goddess spirituality offers women. And that's why she's so popular with women. And that's why patriarchy, I think, squashed it, because they wanted cheap labor. They wanted servants. They didn't want challenges. And I can't help but think that if there were more women in academia, if there were more women in politics, if there were more women in corporate America, if there were more women in a lot of our religious institutions, a lot of the things that go on would be different. Think of the pedophilia in the Catholic Church. Just as one example. But at least over there in Britain, the Church of England now is allowing women to be bishops. So it feels like over in Europe, things are much more progressive for women.
Do you think, though, that we're actually crying out for change? Because I see, and Selena Fox writes about the goddess Libertas and how it's woven throughout history with the symbology. And actually, do you think that the usage of it is almost an unconscious cry?
Well, I think no matter how hard patriarchy and the Abrahamic religions tried, they could not squash the primal need that humanity has for the feminine, because it is part of us, and they try to beat it out of us, but I think we need the sacred feminine just like we all need our mothers. They say that in times of stress and duress and even at people's death, that it's their mother that they generally call out for, that unconditional love, that archetype that, we all want and need so badly. It's the nurturing, the caring, the sharing that is missing from society, and that's part of what she brings to the table, along with with the strength and the tenacity, but she's there saying, let's negotiate, let's collaborate, let's be in partnership. We don't need to go to war as our first method of conflict resolution. There's other things we can do before we spill the blood of our beloved children.
I think it's interesting, the difference in the language of almost the goddess type language, the nurturing, the sharing, the caring, the collaboration. It's so different to what is actually used, as you say, which is almost very aggressive in the patriarchal societies. Now, I know that in the essay with Rev Sandra Spencer, she makes some really interesting points about language and how often it's applied to women, and it's very masculine in regards to how, people are referred to as you guys, and actresses being called actors, and heroines being called heroes. It's very subtle, isn't it? The language, in regards to how it's used with women, without us really realising it. Yet we do have to bring it back to a more feminine, all-encompassing language, which is, as you say, more nurturing.
Yes, she's right about that. And another, and we, within goddess spirituality, we've started to try to adopt new language, because we realize that on an unconscious level, referring to women with a male label, it sort of subtly says that to be valued, to be respected, you have to be a male in a way, like you said. So we, instead of saying like creator God, we say creatrix. And if someone is career clergy and she's a woman, we don't call her a priest, we call her a priestess. So we have started to do things like that to get the point across that we sort of become indoctrinated with this male speak.
It is fascinating because that perspective is for me picked up in Candice Cant's essay, which is about the powerful women, and she points out that, let me just think, she points out about the interconnection of people, and that they've almost forgotten this. And I think that the sacred feminine actually brings you back to the connectedness, brings you back to how we have to think about each other and how we're all affected by what is happening, not just women but also men, children, everybody in our society.
Well, you're absolutely right, and you see, patriarchy wants us to forget that. And let me just sort of take what you just said and put it in in terms that relate to maybe the headlines. If we were living in a goddess culture where there was the caring, the sharing, the reverence for our interconnection, the reverence for partnership, then would we be so quick to let multinational corporations destroy the environment for their profits? Would we let one government decimate another country, just because they were the biggest and the strongest and had the most bullets and bombs? Might doesn't make right in the goddess theology, so to speak, because we would believe that we were all interconnected, that we were all sacred, that we are one human family, and we would do our best to employ negotiation and partnership and peace. But let's face it, we really, when you think about it, it's about greed. It's about power over. It's about domination for natural resources, for cheap oil. We live in this culture where too many people make money off of the exploitation of others, whether it be through war or economics. And if we really believed we were interconnected, then we wouldn't do those things. So I think our religions, our Abrahamic religions, don't teach us that, unfortunately. And, patriarchy is very much, I think, linked in with capitalism, and it gives people a permission to take on this greed is good, and it helps us wear blinders to the suffering that maybe, we cause other people. And, I think that the sacred feminine is really opposed to all of that. It's really about all of us together. It's the we and the us, not the I and the me.
Well, Noam Chomsky, he actually says in the transcript that he felt the pursuit of power and money was almost pathological now, doesn't he?
Oh, I think so. I mean, honestly, the way people act, we should have the dollar bill or the euro on the altar, because but it hasn't always been that way. I mean, you think about it. Greed used to be one of the 7 deadly sins. And I think about I can remember when everybody was, really into Star Trek, and I write about this in Goddess Calling. People I can remember when people wanted to emulate the Star Trek crew and wished they lived in that period of time because people didn't have, people weren't driven by money, and people could pursue their passions, and, we had different values. And it seems like to me that the Ayn Rand phenomena that sort of hit the United States, that was sort of against the idea of the collective, that sort of, just gave permission for people to, just sort of be about themselves, or the Gordon Gekko Wall Street, greed is good, just don't get caught. kind of mentality. I mean, that sort of speaks to our lowest common denominator, and it's nothing about teaching us to be better human beings, to care about one another, to uplift society. Instead, it makes it very, dog-eat-dog, survival of the fittest, very predatory. Yes, I think that's a good word. Whether we're talking about capitalism or economics, it's predatory. And us as consumers, we're sort of the targets in this predator economy. I mean, look at what the banks did, destroying the economy, with no thought to who it was going to hurt. It was just all about, them becoming rich and their stockholders being rich. No integrity, no ethics.
Right, it's interesting, that point, the integrity and ethics. In the moment in Ireland, we are having metering of water happening and huge charges associated with it, which means that we're, effectively the Irish people are being placed into a position of almost being enslaved over their water. And, that's coming down to greed. Where's the integrity? Everyone's affected by water. It's a fundamental of life. And where is it going to stop?
Well, I think we as people have to, get off our sofas, and I think we have to, honestly, peaceful resistance. Like Gandhi taught, like Martin Luther King taught. The people aren't in the streets enough anymore. I don't think. I think too many of us just sort of have given up, and we have to stop that, because you know what, this may seem Pollyanna, but I'm going to say it anyway. I don't care. When it comes to water and oil, and air and resources of the earth, I think Goddess gives us those. She gives us those, and I don't even think that should be something that we should be in a position where we can't afford it, whether it be electricity or those natural resources were given to us by Goddess to be able to have a quality of life. And when oil companies or multinational corporations, stealing water rights, we are really going so far beyond what should be acceptable. I just hope humanity wakes up quickly enough and makes all of this type of business just taboo. That this just is not tolerated, whether it be GMOs or any of this kind of stuff. We have to start thinking about our future, not just these people who are getting rich and richer and richer and richer. I mean, when is enough enough?
I agree. I also agree with the fact that we don't do enough activism anymore. We don't get up off our sofas and get out. I remember when I was a student, we were always stood outside placarding, even if the food in the canteen wasn't hot. We were outside. And nowadays, I do think the fact that education has to be paid for, and it's a rather big debt, that actually it prevents students from actually doing more activism, and people, because they're very much if you're out and you get stopped by the police whilst you're actually doing a level of activism, it will go against you on your CV and in regards to when you're going to get a job. So I do think they've managed to close that down in regards to people actually getting off the sofas more. But I completely agree that we should be.
Well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that that was a threat. In your country. And how convenient is that, isn't it? I mean, who does that serve? That serves the people who we have to stand up against, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's just another way of keeping control. Because, and you brought up education. I think that's another thing that should be something that's free. Here in the United States, when kids get out of college, if they've managed to get student loans and pay for it, they're under such an incredible burden of debt that the debt, becomes this noose around their neck, or take it out of the realm of college students. People are having to hold down more than one job, or one job doesn't pay enough to do, to have the necessities of life. And so, we're becoming this worker class. It's almost a slave class. I mean, I hate to say it, that might sound extreme to some people, but people, don't have the time to dedicate to changing the world, to making it better for everyone, because society has become so warped and so out of balance that the boot is being pressed on our neck ever more heavy. If I think maybe is the way to describe it.
I agree. I feel Jane Aldrage Clanton really sums things up quite well for me when she says that when she became a Baptist minister, she thought the barriers for women were coming down at that point. Instead, she realised that it was a continual challenge. I think she's right in that, as one barrier is actually scaled, another one actually closes in front of you, and it's almost like a revolving door. I thought she's absolutely spot on. What is the next door to be opened, do you think?
Well, I think we're still fighting the same battles. Here in the United States, we have these regressive Republicans who have taken over governorship and Congress and so many of our states at the state level, and they have put in place laws that set women back decades when it comes to reproductive freedoms. They won't vote for minimum wage increases. They won't vote for equal pay for women. It feels like, it's one step forward, two steps back sometimes, whether we're talking about politics or religion. I mean, Jimmy Carter, former President Jimmy Carter, actually left his church because he said sexism is a sin and he can no longer be a part of preventing women from reaching their fullest potential. Patriarchy is not going to roll over and play dead. And I think we are in the middle of the revolution, quite frankly. There are a number of people saying it, and the more I hear it, the more I believe it, and I've started to say it too. I think this is what it looks like. I think we're seeing the last gasps of patriarchy. I think more and more people are starting to say enough is enough. And we just have to keep educating, because at some point we will hit that critical mass, that morphic field, that 100th monkey, however you want to phrase it. And I think it'll be a tipping point. And I think things will change, but we can't get discouraged. We have to, keep fighting the fight, if you will. I mean, I hate to use that militaristic language, but it is a struggle. And I don't think just praying or thinking positive thoughts, I don't think that's enough. Some people will say, well, I'm just going to give it to God. I'm going to, give it up to Goddess, and, she'll take care of it. Anybody knows that, that may be part of it, putting the right energy, the right thoughts into the world. But I think you also have to do the physical things that thwart the regressors while you're trying to make progress in the right direction.
Oh, fantastic interview, Karen. How do people find your show and the book of the same name, Voices of the Sacred Feminine?
Well, thank you for asking. Probably the easiest go-to place is actually my website, which is my name, Karen Tate, Karen, T as in Tom, A, T as in Tom, E. If you go to my website, you can find all of my books. You can find a link to my radio show, which is on Blog Talk Radio. You can actually just go directly there too, if you'd like. But that's where you'll find where I'm going to give talks. You can find a bunch of other interviews I've done there. That's really sort of the go-to place. And if you don't mind me mentioning, I really want to put a plug in for FEM. It's an incredible documentary, FEM, Women Healing the World. It's very courageous. It starts at the beginning, talking about Goddess, talks about the damage religion has in society, but it also offers solutions, the solution of a partnership society. And I'm also going to be leading a tour to Turkey in May of 2015, and we're going to be going to incredible sites around Turkey that were sacred to many different goddesses, during the timeline. And I would just like your listeners to know about that as well. But they can find out more about that on my website too, KarenTate.com.
An absolutely superb book, I have to say. One of my favourites that I've read just recently. It's been my absolute pleasure to have you on today with me, Karen. Thank you for coming on Food for Thought.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And best of luck to you as well.